I woke to the sound of a distant, muffled scream, one that carried through the thick, humid air like a sudden wind sweeping through a forest of thick trees. The kind of scream that doesn't just come from pain, but from fear, genuine, paralyzing fear. It was the kind of scream that made my blood run cold, and my mind immediately tensed up, searching the dark corners of the room for something, anything, that might explain it. But there was nothing. The room was silent again, except for the faint creaks of the old wood beneath me and the occasional hum of the air conditioning that seemed to vibrate the walls more than it actually cooled the air. I looked at the clock, 3:11 a.m. I didn't move. I knew what was coming. I had been hearing things for days now. Nothing specific, nothing you could pin down. Just a feeling, a subtle shift in the air when you weren't paying attention. A flicker in the corner of your eye, a scraping sound on the floor when there was no reason for it. I thought it was just the house settling, or maybe it was my mind playing tricks. I had to keep telling myself that. Otherwise, I might lose what little grip I had on reality. The house was old, built in the early 1900s, by the looks of it, and situated on the outskirts of town, surrounded by dense trees and winding dirt roads. The locals used to tell stories about it, how it had been abandoned for years before I bought it. Strange things happen there, they'd say. But that wasn't why I bought it. I wasn't interested in ghosts or curses or anything supernatural. I was interested in peace. Quiet. The kind of life you can only find in isolation. I had wanted a fresh start. A place where the past couldn't follow. But the moment I set foot in this house, I knew I had made a mistake. At first, I blamed it on the isolation. The silence. It was too much to handle after living in the noise of the city for so long. But I wasn't sure anymore. It felt as if the house itself was watching me, waiting for me to break. I slid my feet out from under the covers, my bare feet touching the cold wooden floor. A quick glance at the window, nothing but the heavy fog that had rolled in over the hills. A thick, damp mist that seemed to smother the world in its embrace. There was no moon tonight. Only shadows. I stood up and walked toward the window, the floor creaking under my weight. The fog outside curled around the trees like fingers stretching for something just out of reach. I couldn't see past the edge of the porch, but I could feel it. That pull. That sensation that someone, was out there, watching me. I wasn't the only one in the house. My wife, Lily, slept in the room down the hall, her soft breathing barely audible over the silence. She had been the one to convince me that we should buy this place. She wanted a new beginning too. But over the past few weeks, her enthusiasm had faded. Her laughter didn't come as easily anymore, and she seemed to spend more time staring out the windows than looking at me. I had hoped it was just stress from the move, but now, I wasn't so sure. I reached for the door and stepped out into the hallway. The floorboards creaked again, louder this time. I paused, listening. No sounds from Lily's room. She was still asleep, or pretending to be. I continued down the hall toward the stairs. There was something in the basement I needed to check. I don't know why I kept putting it off. Maybe it was my intuition telling me that I wasn't ready to confront whatever was down there. The stairs creaked under my weight as I descended, each step echoing through the empty house. I reached the bottom of the stairs and stood there for a moment, letting my eyes adjust to the darkness. The basement door was cracked open. A faint light spilled out, and I could smell something, musty, earthy. The smell of something that hadn't been disturbed in years. I pushed the door open, the hinges protesting with a long, drawn-out squeak. The dim light from the basement bulb flickered above, casting long shadows across the stone floor. There were boxes everywhere, old furniture, dusty books, forgotten remnants of a time before we moved in. But I didn't care about the clutter. What I cared about was the feeling. That same feeling I had felt upstairs. That invisible presence. It was stronger now, almost palpable. I stepped into the basement, my footsteps muffled by the old, damp carpet. My breath quickened, and I couldn't shake the sensation that someone was standing just behind me, watching my every move. I reached out, grabbed the light pull, and the basement filled with a cold, unforgiving light. Nothing. No sounds. No movement. But then I saw it. On the far wall, scratched into the surface of the stone, was a mark, a deep, jagged line. A symbol. I had no idea what it meant, but I had seen it before. In the attic, in the bedroom. Everywhere. It was as if the house was slowly revealing its secrets, one piece at a time. But why now? Why after all this time? I backed away from the wall, heart pounding. The presence was still there, lingering. Watching. Suddenly, I heard it again, the scream. But this time, it was closer. It echoed up from the depths of the house, filling every corner of the empty space. My legs froze, my hands shaking as I turned to face the stairs. Lily was awake now. I could hear her soft, confused whispers, her voice muffled by the distance between us. I had to get to her. I had to make sure she was safe. But as I turned to climb the stairs, I heard something else. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Coming from the hallway above me. I wasn't alone anymore. My breath caught in my throat. The footsteps weren't Lily's. They were heavier. More purposeful. And they were getting closer. "I'm here," I whispered to myself, trying to steady my racing pulse. But as I reached the stairs, the door slammed shut. The house was alive now, vibrating with something unseen, something unfathomable. I didn't move. I couldn't. There was only one thing I knew for certain. They were watching. And they weren't going to stop until they got what they wanted. The morning after the scream was no less disturbing. The house was quiet, but not in the peaceful, calm way I once enjoyed. The silence felt thick, oppressive, like the air itself was too dense to breathe. Lily hadn't come down yet. It wasn't like her to sleep in so late. Normally, she was the first one up, making coffee, reading a book by the window as the sun filtered in through the mist. But not today. Today, everything was wrong. I stood at the bottom of the stairs, my hand gripping the railing. The same weight I felt last night, the sensation of eyes on me, hadn't gone away. I tried to shake it off, to rationalize it as the result of too many late nights and too much stress, but every inch of my body screamed that something was lurking just beyond my understanding. I called out softly, "Lily?" No response. Just the soft hum of the house settling. I swallowed the growing anxiety in my throat and started up the stairs. My feet felt heavier with each step, as if the house itself was pushing me down. The wood creaked beneath my weight, each groan amplifying the silence that seemed to echo throughout the house. The closer I got to the top, the more my senses began to buzz, prickling skin, the scent of stale air, and an overwhelming sense of being watched. I wasn't sure if I was just paranoid anymore or if something was truly wrong. I knocked on Lily's door. "Lily?" I asked again, more firmly this time, but the door swung open before I could wait for an answer. She was sitting on the bed, staring at the wall, her hands clenched in her lap. Her face was pale, and her eyes had that distant look again, the one I had noticed a few days ago when she stopped laughing at my jokes or smiling when I came home. "Hey," I said softly, stepping inside. "What's going on? You okay?" Lily didn't move. She just stared ahead, her gaze fixed on some point beyond the wall, her lips slightly parted as though she were waiting for something to happen. I felt a cold pit form in my stomach. "Lily?" I repeated, stepping closer, my voice trembling now. Still nothing. I placed a hand on her shoulder, and she flinched, as if waking from a trance. Her head snapped toward me, her eyes wide and unblinking. It was like she didn't recognize me at first, and when her eyes finally focused, she seemed to remember who I was. But her expression was empty, hollow. "I heard it," she said in a voice that wasn't quite hers. I felt the blood drain from my face. "What? What did you hear?" "The scream," she whispered, her eyes not leaving mine. "It's not just you. It's not just in your head. I heard it too." She shivered, despite the warmth from the morning sun spilling through the window. The air in the room suddenly felt colder. Her voice, though soft, was loaded with fear. The same fear I had felt last night. I had been trying to convince myself it was just my imagination, just a side effect of living in an old, creaky house. But hearing her say it, seeing the terror in her eyes, made it all too real. "Lily, we need to get out of here," I said, trying to keep the tremor from my voice. "There's something wrong with this house. No." She cut me off, her voice suddenly firm, like she had regained some sense of control. She stood up abruptly, her hands reaching for the window. "It's already here." "What do you mean? What's here?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she pulled the blinds open, staring out into the thick fog that had settled over the land. Her gaze locked onto something in the distance. I turned to follow her line of sight, but I saw nothing but the fog. The same fog that had always been there, creeping through the trees and curling around the house like it had a life of its own. It was nothing new. But her eyes didn't move from it. "It's watching us," she said softly, her voice distant, almost resigned. It never left. I felt my heart slam against my ribs. "What are you talking about? Who's watching us?" Lily's face softened, a flicker of emotion passing through her before she closed her eyes and whispered. "The house. It's been alive for a long time. Longer than we know. It wants something. And it won't stop until it gets it." Her words hung in the air, heavy and unyielding. I had no idea what she meant, but deep down, I felt it. I couldn't explain it, but the house had changed. Something had shifted, and I had been too blind to see it. But now that she had said it, I couldn't ignore the truth anymore. I had been watched, I had felt that cold presence every moment I spent in this place. It wasn't my mind playing tricks. It was real. It was here. I'd opened my mouth to ask more, but before I could speak, Lily turned away from the window, her face a mix of exhaustion and fear. She walked to the door and paused, turning to face me. "You'll start seeing it too. Soon," she said, her voice eerily calm. "We all do, eventually. Everyone who stays here, they all see it." "See what?" I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. But she was already walking out of the room, leaving me to stand in the silence. The air was thick with the weight of her words. I needed answers. But I wasn't sure where to find them. As I followed her out into the hallway, I noticed something different. The house was colder, the shadows darker. The air seemed thicker, as if it was absorbing everything around me. The footsteps creaked again, louder this time, coming from the basement. They were the same as last night, slow, deliberate, like someone or something was moving down there, just out of sight. I felt my breath catch in my throat. "Lily?" I called out, but she was already halfway down the stairs. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. It was here. And now, I understood. Whatever it wasn't just in the house. It had been following us from the moment we set foot in it. But that didn't matter now. Because it wasn't just watching us anymore. It was waiting. The light in the basement flickered when we reached the bottom. One of those old bulbs dangling from a wire, barely bright enough to cut through the thick air. It swung gently, though there was no draft. No breeze. Just stillness. Stillness and that hum. Not a sound exactly, more like a pressure inside your skull. A pulsing awareness. Lily stood ahead of me, not moving. Her posture was too rigid, too still. I wanted to call her name, but something about the room made speaking feel wrong. Like my voice would summon something best left buried. We hadn't spoken much since coming downstairs. She led the way as if on instinct, her bare feet silent on the steps. My breath was the only sound I could hear, quick and uneven. I was carrying the flashlight now. The bulb overhead cast long shadows against the stone walls, and every corner of the basement felt just slightly wrong. Like it didn't line up the way it should. "Lily," I finally said, not above a whisper. She turned slowly. "It's here." The flashlight flickered in my hand. I scanned the room. Boxes. Old furniture. Tools hung on rusted nails. A stack of picture frames leaned against the far wall. That smell again, mold, damp wood, and something metallic underneath. Something like rust. Or blood. Then I saw it. In the far right corner of the basement, the wall was no longer stone. It looked stretched. The bricks were warped, as though something had pressed against them from the inside and melted them into a soft bulge. A distortion? My brain didn't want to make sense of it. I saw that 2 nights ago, Lily murmured, her eyes fixed on the wall. It wasn't like that before. I stepped closer, heart pounding. The air was colder near the bulge. My skin tingled like the edge of a fever dream. I reached out but didn't touch it. My hand hovered just inches from the surface. The wall seemed to pulse, once, like a slow heartbeat. I stepped back. What is it? I asked. She shook her head. It's how they watch. How they come through. They. I didn't ask who she meant. We both already knew. The ones who never spoke aloud, who never showed their faces. But we felt them. Always. The ones who had been waiting. Listening. A sharp creak behind us made both of us spin. The basement door, still open, had moved. Only a few inches, but I saw it. It wasn't a breeze. It was as if something had brushed against it on its way in. I lifted the flashlight, scanning the stairs, but there was nothing there. And then the bulb overhead popped, dead, and we were plunged into a half-dark world of shadows and flickering flashlight beams. Something shifted in the corner. Not the bulge this time, but behind the shelves. A soft scrape. Then silence. Lily grabbed my arm. Her grip was ice cold. We need to run, she whispered. My stomach twisted. Where? Anywhere. We didn't speak again. We moved fast, up the stairs, skipping steps, my hand gripping hers tighter than I realized. The flashlight bounced with each step, casting dizzying shapes on the walls. When we burst into the hallway, the air felt different. Thicker. Charged. And then we heard it. Footsteps above us. Slow. Deliberate. Not heavy, but not light either. Measured. Like someone, something, was walking just enough to be heard. They're in the house, Lily said. She didn't sound panicked. Just certain. I pulled her into the kitchen and shut the door behind us, hand shaking as I locked it. Pointless, I knew, but the instinct to seal ourselves in was too strong. I backed away, flashlight pointed at the doorway. We waited. Breathing. Something passed by the kitchen window. I froze. Not a person. Not a shape you'd recognize. Just movement. Darker than the night outside. Not fast. But knowing. My voice was dry. They're outside now? They're everywhere. We stood like statues. Listening. The sound of the refrigerator motor kicked on. I flinched. Lily didn't. She was staring at the ceiling. Above us, the footsteps had stopped. And then, suddenly, they were running. Not walking. Not creeping. Running. Across the ceiling. Heavy, desperate, violent. The kind of sound that makes every animal instinct in your body scream one word. Asterisk, asterisk, flee, asterisk, asterisk. We ran. Out the back door. Into the fog. Barefoot on frozen grass. The house behind us didn't groan. Didn't protest. It just watched us go, quiet and still. We didn't talk. We didn't look back. We ran through the trees, through wet leaves and branches that whipped against our arms. The fog was worse than I remembered, thick and swirling, as if alive. Shapes moved just beyond the veil, pacing us. Not chasing. Accompanying. Like shadows running alongside us just out of reach. I don't know how far we ran. Minutes. Maybe more. Until we came to the road, the narrow one that leads to the highway. A street light flickered overhead, the first real light we'd seen. I collapsed to the ground, gasping. Lily stood perfectly still, staring back into the trees. And then she said something I didn't expect. They didn't follow. I looked up. What? They didn't need to. I turned toward the woods. Quiet now. The fog had stopped at the tree line, as if held back by something unseen. It didn't reach the road. I didn't ask why. We sat there for a long time, the road empty, no cars, no sound but the ticking of the street light. I didn't know where we'd go. Back wasn't an option. Forward, maybe? Lily finally turned to me. We weren't supposed to run, she said. What do you mean? Her voice cracked. They only watch until you run. That's when it begins. We were quiet again. And just before the light above us flickered out, I heard it. Another pair of footsteps. But this time, they were running too. Behind us. Getting closer. We didn't stop running. The footsteps behind us were getting closer, faster, their echoing cadence too steady to be random. I could feel them gaining, not just in distance but in presence, as if the fog itself had taken on weight, slipping through the cracks of the world, following us, pursuing us with a singular purpose. Lily was ahead, her figure barely visible in the swirling mist, but I knew she was just as terrified as I was. She didn't need to say it, I could feel it, the way her steps faltered every so often. She was holding back, saving whatever energy she could, but the weight of what was chasing us was too much. It was relentless. It would never stop. We didn't talk. We didn't need to. There were no words for what was happening. The sky had turned an unnatural gray, as though the day had decided to give up and let the fog take over completely. It wasn't morning anymore, but it wasn't night either. The hours felt lost, folded into themselves. The road stretched on for miles, but it was just the same as every other road we had passed. The world was drowning in fog, and it felt like we were running in place. The trees pressed in around us, narrowing our path until we could barely see anything more than silhouettes. "Lily!" I shouted, the first words I'd spoken in what felt like hours. My voice cracked, thin and desperate. "We can't keep running like this." She didn't answer. Her feet kept moving, the only sound in the fog. I was losing her, losing my grip on the reality of it all. The weight of the chase, the constant pounding of footsteps, was starting to blur together. I wanted to stop, to think, but there was no room for thought, only instinct. Run. Keep running. Another sharp turn in the road. More trees. The sound of her breath, labored and ragged, matched my own. "We need to hide," I said, my voice quieter this time, a flicker of hope in my words. "There's got to be somewhere." But she was already moving faster, faster than I could keep up with. And in that moment I knew. She wasn't running to survive. She was running to escape. Lily had already given up. I stopped, suddenly paralyzed by the realization. The cold air rushed past me, and I felt my knees weaken. I couldn't catch my breath. She was ahead now, far ahead. She had crossed the line. There was no going back for her. A cold breeze swept past, like a warning. The footsteps behind us didn't stop. They were still there, still coming. I turned around, desperate. There was nowhere to go. The road behind us was a dead end. The fog had consumed the space between us and anything that resembled civilization. The road was a thin line between life and whatever waited in the dark corners of this place. I could hear her, Lily, panting, her steps quickening. "Lily!" I shouted again, this time louder, more urgent. She didn't respond. I stumbled toward her, the distance between us too great to close in a meaningful way. A sudden, sharp noise from behind, the footsteps had stopped. I froze, my heart racing in my chest. It wasn't like before. There was no more rhythm, no more chase. It was waiting. Waiting for something. I looked back. The fog had thickened even more, crawling into the road in long tendrils that swallowed everything in their path. The trees, once towering, were now bent, twisted. The mist curled upward in strange spirals, moving like fingers, too slow, too deliberate. And then, in the distance, something moved. A shape. No, not a shape. A presence larger than anything I had seen before, stretching out from the fog, shuddering like it was waking from a deep slumber. I took a step back. No. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't see its face, but I could feel its eyes, its gaze. I turned around to find Lily, but she had stopped too. She was frozen ahead of me, staring out at the same thing I was seeing, feeling star. There was no fear in her expression now. There was nothing. It wasn't her anymore. She was gone. Whatever had been in her eyes before, that was gone. You should have known, she whispered, her voice dead, hollow. I backed away, confusion crashing over me. Her words didn't make sense. What was she saying? What was happening? It's too late, she continued, her voice not her own. It was the voice of someone who had already seen what was coming. You think you can escape, but it doesn't work like that. I was too slow, too unsure. The air was too thick. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't speak. She was already fading into the fog, walking away from me, walking toward whatever it was. Lily! Come back! I reached out to her, but my legs felt heavy, like they were cemented to the ground. I could barely move. The shape in the fog took a step forward. No, it took a step forward, not the fog. The fog wasn't just fog. It had form, weight. It was becoming something else. Something real. I felt a sharp pain in my chest. A cold, violent tug. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. Lily's figure disappeared into the fog, lost to the growing mass of shadows. No mercy. The words floated in the air, not spoken aloud but felt, a cold promise hanging in the weightless space between breaths. I ran. This time, I didn't look back. There was no place to hide, no way out, but I had to keep moving. I didn't care where I went anymore, just as long as I wasn't standing still. I reached the end of the road. The fog reached with me. I was alone now, my heart pounding, every breath shallow and frantic. The sound of footsteps was gone. The presence was gone. The road behind me had disappeared. I had nowhere left to go, nothing left to run from. Only what was watching. And it was waiting. The moment I stopped, it would take me too. No escape. No mercy.